안녕하세요.
네.
네, 시간이 되었기 때문에 유네스코 세계기록유산 지역간 학술대회를 시작을 하도록 하겠습니다. 지금 현재 그 동시 통역이 진행되고 있으니까 그 채널은 확인해 주시면 될 것 같습니다. 한국어는 1번이고요. 영어는 2번으로 지금 서비스가 되고 있습니다. 어, 오늘 한국 특히 안동에서는 굉장히 그 행사가 많은 날입니다. 그래서 어, 굉장히 많은 중요한 손님들이 오셨음에도 불구하고 사실은 그 이 자리에 또 많이 참석하지 못하는 분들도 계시고 해서 좀 아쉽게 생각합니다만은 그럼에도 불구하고 멀리 이렇게 그 이곳까지 찾아주신 모든 분들에게 감사를 드리고요. 지금 그 행사는 현재 그 모캡과 모캡에서 주재해서 모라카 아크모를 초청해서 오늘 오전에 저희들이 이제 그 같이 협력 방안에 대한 어떤 그 MOU를 진행을 했고요. 거기에 대한 구체적인 방안이 오늘 오후에 주로 학술 대회로 진행이 될 예정입니다. 그리고 그 지금 우리 뒤에 참석하시는 그 한국 분들은 대부분 한국에서 유네스코 세계유산을 관리하고 있거나 혹은 경제를 추진하고 있는 기관의 담당자들입니다. 그래서 지금 그 어, 다양한 어떤 그 교류 방안이나 또 협력 방안들에 대한 관심들과 또 앞으로 실제로 이제 그 일을 좀 같이 이렇게 추진할 수 있는 분들로 오늘 초청해서 같이 이렇게 회의를 진행을 하게 되었습니다. 그런 자리인 만큼 어, 좀 이렇게 소통하고 또 서로 터놓고 얘기할 수 있는 그런 그 중요한 시간이 되었으면 좋겠다는 생각을 가지고 있습니다. 따로 뭐 워낙 중요하신 분들이라서 제가 따로 이렇게 일일이 소개를 다 드리는 거는 크게 의미가 없을 것 같다는 생각이 좀 들고요. 그리고 어, 그 모캡이나 모락 혹은 아크몬에서 오신 분들은 좀 이따 계속 그 발표가 진행될 예정이기 때문에 그건 그렇게 진행을 하고 또 한국에서 오신 분들도 지금 중요한 분들이 굉장히 많은데 제가 일일이 다 이렇게 소개를 할 수 있는 그런 상황이 아닌 것을 좀 양해를 해주셨으면 고맙겠습니다. 오늘 원래 그 한국국제원 원장님께서 참석하기로 하셨는데 다른 굉장히 좀 기묘한 일정 때문에 오늘 좀 자리를 좀 비우셔서 대신 그 국가진흥 원장님을 대신해서 우리 배성길 부원장님께서 인사말을 하고 바로 학술대회를 진행하도록 그렇게 하겠습니다. 예, 배성길 부원장님 모시겠습니다.
예, 부원장입니다. 점심 식사 맛있게 드셨습니까? 예, 오전에 뵙고 또 오후에 또 뵌 것 같습니다. 그리고 오후에 우리 학술대회는 우리 대한민국의 각 지역에서 유네스코 관련 업무를 담당하시는 분들도 같이 오셨는데 오늘 학술대회에서 좀 심도 있는 논의를 해서 좋은 아이디어도 도출해 주시고 그렇게 해 주시기를 부탁을 드리겠습니다. 특별히 우리 김기괴 유네스코 목회 의장님, 피터 슐랭 몰라 의장님, 파타 무마르 디오프, 알모 회장님 등 각 지역에서 멀리 해외에서 오신 위원님들한테 다시 한번 고맙다는 말씀을 드리겠습니다. 음, 우리 이 국학진흥원은 목캡 사무국으로서 여러 가지 역할을 많이 하고 있습니다만 앞으로도 업무 역할을 좀 더 정대해서 어, 유네스코의 여러 가지 발전 방안이나 협력 지원 방안을 적극적으로 지원해 주겠다는 말씀을 드리겠습니다. 오전에 이어서 오후에도 하고 있습니다만은 우리 국학기인원이 명실상부하게 유네스코 아시아 지역 태평양 위원회에서 그 역할을 할 수 있도록 중심 역할이 되도록 최선을 다하겠다는 말씀을 드리겠습니다. 계시는 동안 건강하시고 즐겁게 추억을 많이 쌓아가는 그런 시간이 되었으면 좋겠습니다. 그리고 국내에서 오신 분들도 이 학술대회를 끝나고 나면은 지역도 좀 투어도 해보시고 우리 박물관도 한번 가보시고 하는 그런 즐거운 시간이 되었으면 좋겠습니다. 어, 학술대회를 잘 마치시고 건강하게 돌아가시기 바랍니다. 감사합니다.
네, 감사드립니다. 그러면 저도 인사를 드리겠습니다. 저는 그 오늘 학술대회 행사를 맡은 한국국학진흥원의 기록유산센터를 맡고 있는 센터장 이상으로 합니다. 반갑습니다. 어제 벌써 그 외국에서 오신 분들하고는 지금 3일째 계속 식사를 같이 하면서 이렇게 지내고 있습니다. 그래서 어, 이제 오늘 아마 굉장히 중요한 저는 논의 자리라고 저희를 보고 있습니다. 이게 그 잘 아시는 것처럼 세계기록유산은 지금 국제 목록하고 또 지역 목록이 이렇게 나누어져 진행되고 있는데 아마 무엇보다도 지역 목록이 갖는 중요성이 저는 굉장히 크다고 생각하고 이번 학술 대회를 기획을 하게 되었습니다. 원래 인사말로 우리 그 각 그 목회 또 모락 아크모 의장님들이 인사 말씀을 드려야 되는데 이게 바로 사실은 발표가 좀 이어지기 때문에 그냥 그 인사말을 이렇게만 발표를 이렇게 바로 듣는 걸로 그렇게 진행을 하겠습니다. 그리고 원래 오늘 그 안동시장님도 참석을 하시기로 하셨는데 굉장히 중요한 기념 일정 때문에 또 지금 그 외부 일정이 지금 굉장히 좀 바쁘게 돌아가는 부분들이 좀 많이 있습니다. 그래서 참석하지 못해서 좀 죄송하다는 말씀을 꼭 좀 전해달라고 부탁을 해왔습니다. 그래서 양해 말씀 다시 한 번 더 드리도록 하겠습니다. 그러면 그 본발표로 바로 들어가도록 하겠습니다. 우선 그 오늘 전체 일정은 어, 지금 그 각 위원회 위원장님께서 오늘 오전에 저희들이 그 한국 분들은 참석을 못하셨습니다만은 세계 어떤 지역위원회 간에 앞으로 업무 방안을 놓고 MOU를 체결을 했습니다. 그래서 향후에 어떤 방안으로 저희들이 협업하고 또 이 일을 계속 잘 만들어 갈지에 대한 고민들을 진행하는 그런 자리가 뭐 오후 학술 대회가 될 걸로 이렇게 생각을 하고 있습니다. 그래서 첫 번째는 우선 그 각 위원회 위원장님들의 현재 그 각 위원 그 지역위원회의 역할 또 어떤 일들을 하고 계시는지에 대한 소개를 좀 간단하게 듣는 그런 시간을 한 시간 정도 갖도록 하겠습니다. 그리고 커피 브레이크 이후에 지금 그 실제로 이제 이 업무를 담당하고 계시는 각 지역위원회의 그 부회장님이나 혹은 사무국장님들로부터 현재 어떤 상황과 또 앞으로 어떤 과제들을 가지고 일을 준비하고 있는지에 대한 고민들을 듣는 그런 시간을 갖도록 하겠습니다. 그리고 3시부터는 어, 지금 현재 이 지역위원회는 어쨌든 각 나라의 어떤 국가위원회를 기반으로 운영을 하는 게 원칙으로 되어 있습니다. 그래서 특히 이제 한국 같은 경우는 작년에 저희들 그 국가위원회가 설립이 되었고요. 그리고 또 중앙아시아나 이쪽에서 활동하고 계신 선생님들 통해서 다양한 어떤 얘기를 들어보는 그런 시간을 이제 1시간 정도 가질 예정입니다. 그리고 실제로 아마 오늘 가장 핵심은 한 2시간 정도 앞으로 협업 방안을 논의하는 자리가 되지 않을까라고 생각을 합니다. 그래서 여기 계신 분들도 그렇고 또 한국에서 참석하신 분들도 그렇고 그 논의 방안 그 앞으로 협력 방안에 대한 어떤 그 토론 또 논의에 많이 참여를 해주셨으면 고맙겠습니다. 그러면 우선 그 이 행사를 주최하고 또 실제로 어 지금 호스트로서 좀 역할을 하고 계시는 목회배 김기배 본부장 의장님을 모시고 일단 인사 말씀과 그리고 세계기록유산 아시아태평양 지역위원회 개요에 대해서 듣도록 하겠습니다. 우선 발표는 여기서 하시겠습니다. 네, 김기배 의장님을 모시겠습니다. 네.
아, 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 들리시네. 예. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kyubek Kim, chair of MOCAP, and once again, I welcome and thank for coming to the intergovernmental, interregional conference here in Andong. It is my great pleasure to introduce MOCAP's activities in this important occasion. Next slide, please. So what I'm going to do today is I will make a presentation on overview of MOCAP activities. I'm sure some of you are very familiar to this presentation, so I'm afraid it will be a little bit boring, so I'll make it briefly as I can. And next slide, please. Yes. First of all, I'd like to introduce what vocab aims to do. To summarize briefly, there are four main posts. The first one is to increase the establishment of national MOW committees. As you know, we have only 21 among 45 countries. That means that we have a more homework to encourage the member states to establish the national committee. The second one is to maintain the Asia Pacific Regional Register of MOW documentary heritage. We have only 65 items. I heard that MOLEC has more than that, right? So we'll do our best to increase the more new items. And third one is to increase the awareness of the importance of documentary heritage, improve its accessibility and use. And first one is mobilize resources and support for the MOW project and activities. Next slide, please. This is the picture of our foundation in 1998, Beijing in China. Thankful China. So we have more than almost 20 to more than 20 years, right? And next slide, please. Now MOCAP is composed of MOW national committees in the member states in Asia Pacific region. As of today, 21 out of 45 countries in the Asia Pacific we have active MOW National Committee, but number of national committees are in formation. Next slide, please. MOCAP Bureau is responsible for the planning and organizing and implementing and monitoring the work programs approved by the general meeting of the MOCAP. And we have assigned UNESCO regional advisors, is an ex-official members. Next slide, please. As you see, in the case of bureau members and one chair and three vice chairs, secretary general, and UNESCO ex-official members, that means from UNESCO Bangkok office, and we have five registered subcommittee, and also we have a very special advisors system, but now newly composition. Next slide, please. Normally, bureau members are elected of terms of 4 years, but this bureau and also bureau normally meets at least once a year. The next slide, please. As for the MOCAP bureaus, MOCAP has traditionally supported by the UNESCO via budget of UNESCO Bangkok office, and but the funds have been predominantly used for the general meeting. That means such as bring the delegates from the developed countries to the meeting. Fortunately, we have in the past 6 years we have a partnership with Asia Culture Center, so we can have some mobilize some fund, and so we can implement it small grant programs and also some kind of seminars and general meetings and everything. But from the 2022, new partnership has begun with here in Korean Studies Institute, so we can host a MOCAP generous meetings the last year in here in Andong. Next slide, please. So with this KSI partnership, provide financial and human resources support to MOCAP for activities, projects, and office functions. So usually at least $90,000 dollars to MOCAP activities and human resources as well. Next slide, please. I'm very happy to say that the last year, November, we have announced the MOCAP general meeting in Andong, and more than 138 participants from the 25 countries take part in, and then bureau members and 3 representatives and 80 observers from various institutions across the region. The meeting covers various kind of topics, including revision of MOCAP rules of procedures, UNESCO National Committee's report, and decision on inscription. Next slide, please. During the last general meeting in Andong, 9 new items were inscribed to MOCAP regional register. So we have now 65 inscriptions. Next slide, please. As you see, this is a new register 2022, so including 2 items from China and 3 items from Republic Korea. Next slide, please. And this is most important program, so we are very proud of it. And this program is prioritized the protection and dissemination of valuable recorded memories that are vulnerable to damage, such as films and documentaries that showcase the distinctive cultures and identities of Asia and the Pacific. To date, 45 projects from 15 different countries have been supported by this program, which can include funding for preservation efforts, digitization, exhibition, publication, workshop, training program, expert assessment, and other related initiatives. By providing financial assistance to memory institutions, the MOCAP grant program helps to support the preservation of documentary heritage in the Asia Pacific region. Next slide, please. This is our website, and this is the way the sharing the public with the important information of the region and raise awareness. Next slide, please. To promote MOCAP's activity to the public, we utilize not only the website management, but also the variety of the other communication promotional tools. As you see, the newsletters, it's twice a year, and we use Facebook's publications and YouTube and also the Instagram. Next slide, please. Also, we are Bangkok office and MOCAP is very close cooperation. So in the case of 2022, Bangkok office launched the online during the pandemic, the online exhibition regarding the names of women in history, telling her story through the Memory World project. So we are supporting and then very close relationship with this project. And next slide, please. This book, Let's Explore the Memory World, is mm, comprised of written and illustrated description as well as carefully compiled information and photographs about the memory world missions and inscriptions. It was produced by the Bangkok office, and we how can I say we make it possible for the Bangkok office to mobilize some fund and for the printings and some other financial resources. So this book is regarding some kind of information about very important themes like languages, religions, geography, and gender equality, mutual understanding, and human rights. Next slide, please. Also, our bureau members are very active to publicize our bureau MOCAP's activities in the region. So in the case of last February, actually, in the Bangkok office, invite 17 experts from the memory institution across the Asia Pacific regions and discuss about the training methodology in disaster risk management for documented heritage at risk, organized by Bangkok and supported with the JFIT. This meeting's objectives included collecting and sharing cases, studies, and experience from the diverse countries and contexts, discussing the local community's roles and innovative methods in DRM. Next slide, please. And this is very good practice. And as you see, in last July, actually, in MOCAP and MOLEC, we have some inter-regional dialogue programs. So our bureau members attend and contribute organizing this online workshop. This is the way we are aimed to on the basis of our MOU. Next, please. And MOCAP has supported participate a number of seminars, capacity building workshop this year. As you see, we have some seminar in Cambodia and Mongolia and Indonesia. So sometimes we are in person, but also if impossible, then we can online join the online discussion. Next slide, please. And before that, 전으로 좀 돌려주세요. 하나 빠졌. 예. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah. Finally, actually, oh yeah. Actually, this is not organized by the MOCAP, but this is a workshop is jointly organized by the Korean National Commission for UNESCO, and also our bureau members and experts take part in this workshop. So this workshop actually aims to help our fellow member states when they are preparing for the nomination. Then they need some advice and lectures and something like that. So when the member states prepare for the draft or not dossier, then our panel of experts provide the feedback and to make the nomination completed. So two MOCAM RSC members, namely Dr. Helen and Professor So, and me, to participate in this workshop. This workshop is invited on 12 representatives from the 9 countries, including African and Arab region. So in this workshop, that I felt lots of demand from the African region. They are underrepresented. They need some capacity buildings and they need some support. So maybe hopefully next year we will organize this workshop in the African countries. So then I kindly request the chair of ACMO will help us to more and more African countries to participate in our workshop. Next slide, please. Yes, we have a next slide, please. Yes, we have a very lots of challenges and tasks. Especially, we need some strengthen. We need some strengthen the grant programs actually. So MOCAP will make every effort to enlarge the grant programs to support member states in the region that need a financial and technical support. Additionally, with the support of the Korean Studies Institute, we plan to hold capacity building workshop on the preservation and utilization of the documentary heritage. Also, if possible, maybe we can have this kind of inter-regional conference every year or once and every 2 years. Maybe we can make this kind of opportunity to strengthen and enhancing our cooperation inter-regional committees. Okay, this is all what I prefer for. So thank you for your kind attention.
네, 감사드립니다. 다시 한번 박수 좀 주시겠습니까? 네, 고맙습니다. 네. 목격의 그 인사 말씀을 겸한 그 전체 지금 현재 진행되고 있는 일들에 대한 발표를 들으셨습니다. 다음으로 굉장히 멀리서 오셨습니다. 어제 제가 30몇 시간이라는 말씀을 제가 들었는데요. 그리고 현재 그 세계기록유산 라틴 아메리카 카리브해 지역위원회의 의장을 맡고 계시는 피터 슐링 의장님을 모시고 인사 말씀과 더불어서 현재 그 모락에서 이루어지고 있는 일들에 대한 얘기를 조금 들어보도록 그렇게 하겠습니다. 피터 슐링 의장님 모시겠습니다. 네, 앞으로 나와주시겠습니까?
Thank you, Mr. Lee. My name is Peter Scholing. I'm the current president of MOLAC, and I have the honor to give you a brief introduction of our regional committee. First slide, please. Um, MOLAC stands for the Memory of the World Committee for Latin America and the Caribbean. Next slide. It has a long history, actually. It was established in the year 2000 in Mexico. And 2 years after, we started adding the first nominations to the register. And since 20 years since, we've come to a total of 208 nominations in total. In one of the next slides, you'll see why. One of the main reasons is that we have a yearly cycle instead of a biannual cycle that that the regional and the international committees have. Those 200 plus nominations were published in a book a few years ago, was translated into Portuguese this year as well. Next slide, please. It's available online. So I'll give you the time to scan it. I also have a few copies with me for those who want to see it and browse through it. If you can go back to the previous slide for a bit. So the slide before this? No, before this, two before this. So back 2 slides, please. Yeah, one more. Yes, okay. Well, it's just like MOCAP. Our region does actually consist of 2 regions, the Latin America and the Caribbean. You can also see from the 2 logos that we have a bilingual situation, and we're both operating in Spanish and in English. It's a very diverse region. The Latin American mainland has a lot of big countries, hundreds of millions of people, big memory institutions, national institutions with good funding, good national collaboration within the nations, but also really small memory institutions as well. In the Caribbean, the situation is actually completely different. It consists of many small island development states, SIDS, many different languages being spoken, and also many territorial situations going on. And countries, overseas territories, former colonies, independent parts of kingdoms, for instance. So it's quite diverse, and it's a region that's also really vulnerable to risks, hurricanes, volcanoes, global warming, to name a few. My colleague Angus Martin will go in more depth into that when he's talking about our challenges, but also human-induced risks, armed conflicts, protests, civil unrest, but also theft, vandalism, but also inadequate funding. There's some really sad but important to show examples of that. My colleague Angus Martin will also do that. But what we do have is a rich history, a shared history. Amerindian, pre-Columbian societies, colonization, decolonization, diaspora, not only of people, but also of collections and documents. Next slide, please. So the next thing I'm going to do is show you a couple of pages of our book to show some examples of our diverse documentary heritage. The next slide, please. And what you can see from this is that our documentary heritage, well, the one on the left, it highlights our Caribbean history from Barbados. We have a special guest from Barbados over here, right now, Miss Cummins. And it shows our connection with the African diaspora. It is an African song or chant. It is inscribed into the register in 2019. It's actually located in the UK, and that's one example of the diaspora of documents as well. And the one on the right shows our native inhabitants, in this case of Mexico. And if you go to the next slide, please, you can see that it's not just documents printed on paper. Our documentary heritage consists also of petroglyphs, that is information inscribed into rocks. And on the right, you can see that it's into textiles, into ropes. Next slide, please. We have a lot of really rich audiovisual collections. When you think about documentary heritage, usually you think about old things, but the document inscribed on the right is quite recent, actually. It's a peace agreement between the state of Colombia and the FARC, the rebels. It was a really important moment for that country. It had regional significance, and that's actually the newest, the most recent document that is on our register at this moment. If you go to the next slide, please. Here's a list that my colleague Angus will also show. There's a lot of countries in our region. And if you can see, it's not just countries, it's also dependencies. We have over 40 countries with current inscriptions, and just a few countries, it's not, you probably cannot see it, but it's a total of 50 different nations and territories that constitute our region. And there are even a couple of countries that have 0 inscriptions. And we have a plan for that, and that's what I'm going to show in one of our final slides. Please go to the next slide, please. Well, you've just heard how MOCAP is constituted. We do things quite differently, as we've seen in our informal talks in the last couple of days. Our regional committee consists of just 9 people. We don't have any subcommittees. We have 9 members. They're elected in a personal capacity, so they're not representing a nation or an institution. Our term is 4 years, and because the Latin American sub-region is quite much bigger, they have 6 members, and we have 3 members from the Caribbean. We also have 2 regional advisors and a permanent secretariat that is based in Montevideo at the UNESCO office over there. Our terms as presidents and vice presidents is only 2 years. So I was elected last year. My term ends next year in November already. But yeah, that's maybe a way to keep things fresh, I guess. The interesting thing, when I became president, I was also a new member. So that means that when my term ends next year, I'll be a member, maybe in another function, in another capacity within our committee. I cannot be the president anymore because the presidency rotates between the subregions, but that's also a way to balance things out. The next slide, please. If we go back to last year, 2022, it was a year of restart, of a new beginning. As you all have experienced, we have gone through a pandemic, but also the Memory of the World program has also went to a state of it stopped. It stopped for a couple of years, and it also reflected on our regional committees. So 2022 was the first year since 2018 that actually we had a call for nominations. We adopted 17 new inscriptions into the register, but also we did a lot of work on We worked on new statutes, new code of ethics, new rules of operation. Those 17 new additions, 16 of them were from Latin America and just 1 from the Caribbean. If you go to the next slide, you can see that in this year's international cycle, the representation was quite different. There was a total of 64 new items inscribed into the international register. 3 of them were from Latin America, and actually 4 of them, so that's a majority compared to Latin America, was from the Caribbean. You see that most nominations from the Caribbean to the international register are mostly joint nominations. Yeah, that's a thing. That's a thing that you can see also in the regional register. The smaller the countries tend to be, the necessity of joint nominations becomes more clear. There are a lot of links between these small island nations as well. Then next slide, please. So what we started doing this year during my presidency was we thought it was time for a couple of changes. And many of these changes were just around the same time that we met with our colleagues from the different regions in March in Paris. So we had the opportunity to talk with Ms. Helen Jarvis about forms, about new elements to put into those. We try to make our forms, our procedure a bit more easier, simpler. They were more in line with the international and with the regional forms from the other regions. And we also tried to do a bit of standardization with UNESCO's values and the wording used. We opened our call in March. The deadline was in June. We extended it by 15 days to August, and we will decide on them in November. So that means that with similar deadlines in MOCAP, we decide this year in November, then we open our next call again, probably in March, and then we do the same thing next year again. If you go to the next slides, maybe those of you in MOCAP, in the Register Subcommittee, will recognize this. It's the result of the standardization between regional. We actually took a lot of inspiration from the MOCAP forms, actually. The only difference, everything has to be bilingual. That's an extra barrier. We recognize that, an extra barrier for those nominating institutions, because they don't have to fill it out in one form, but they have to do it in two languages. But yeah, the standardization and the inspiration we got, you can also show it in the next slide, please. And also taking over some of the best practices, like the checklist, and it proved really useful. Next slide. So this resulted for this year's cycle in a total of 32 applications. Yesterday I mentioned in our informal talks 31, but it was 32. Two of them we did a technical evaluation after this deadline of the submissions. Two proved to be incomplete. So we have a total of 30 nominations to evaluate this year in November, next month. That's an increase from last year. We thought that maybe after a lot of years that the program wasn't open, that maybe that was a year that we had a lot of nominations and it would go down again, but it proved to be an increasing line. So let's see what happens next year as well. And I would like to close this presentation to highlight some of our current projects just briefly. Next slide, please. We have 3 current projects, which is the first is a risk survey. The second one is not just a revamp of our website, but also something we call the observatory. And finally, a roadmap for one of our subregions, the Caribbean subregion. Next slide, please. So we have over 200 nominations. They span a couple of decades. We realized that it was really important we have the forms, we have information. A lot of the information stays the same. The collections stay the same. Contact information might change, but what is really important and in some cases also really necessary is to check on the current status of the risks involved. So that's why we did a risk survey. It's still being evaluated. The results will be published when we publish our observatory website. but it has already shown us a couple of indicators in what we have to target and what we have to work on the next couple of years. Next slide, please. This is a preview of the next website. It says expected last trimester of 2023. We're already into that. When we presented this observatory for the items registered in our regional register, we presented it to the international committee and on different platforms, also to the other regional committees. And it's currently not just being developed as a regional project, but it's being developed together with the international, with Memory of the World headquarters in UNESCO in Paris. So that's why it's taking a bit longer, but it's also being, well, it's resulting in a more compliant website, more up to date, more in line with the international register. So hopefully next time around, in our next international conference, I'll be able to present it to you and show you all the features of it. But this, for now, we just have a preview, but we'll keep you updated on that. Our next slide, please. It's actually the final topic, the roadmap for the Caribbean. And you might think, well, why do we need a roadmap for one of our subregions? That's a good question. I'm from the Caribbean myself. We have a couple of representatives from our subregion right here. Well, it was developed, it's still being developed actually to mitigate it's one of the subregions that has specific challenges. And our Caribbean subregion, it consists of many different nations, small island nations. For instance, my country, Aruba, only has 110,000 inhabitants compared to countries with hundreds of millions inhabitants that are also in our subregion or in our region. And we have a lot of specific problems of scale, mostly. Organizational budgets, facilities. We have national organizations, but our scale is so small that there's not really funding available within the country to maintain everything on a national level and according to international standards. And we also have a high number of risks we have to deal with. It's volcanoes, it's rain season, hurricane season, and more recently global warming, rising sea levels, changing temperatures. It's already really hot and tropical in the Caribbean, but over the last couple of years, the problems have increased. One of the things we have started to work on already, it's a continuing process, but what we started working on already is doing workshops. And workshops cost money. Our MOLAC budget isn't that big, but sometimes we get help, for instance, from the Republic of Korea. We're really grateful for those kinds of, for that support. And instead of inviting a lot of people over to a specific island, which is quite costly, we try to do it a bit differently. So our first initiative was to go to an existing conference, and you can see it on the right. We went to the annual Caribbean Library Conference called ACURIL. It was held in Jamaica, which is coincidentally also where the UNESCO Regional Office for the Caribbean is based, so that was quite handy to organize it. And that's an occasion where over 200, 300 librarians, professionals, a lot of them documentary heritage professionals and researchers come together every year. And so that means that if you do workshops and presentations, and we did 2 presentations over there, 2 workshops actually, one taking over 2 hours, the other one was a bit shorter, but we reached hundreds of people in just 1 week. And if you compare the cost for inviting people over for a workshop of just a few days, well, it cannot compare. So we try to do this as a repeating thing. There are also museum conferences like Miss Cummins is well aware of and is always present. Archival conference, so we think this is a model that we can repeat. Um, there are many more needs for our Caribbean subregion that need to be addressed. We're trying to establish a working group, a more formal working group on that. And with the help of exchanges like this, I hope we can, yeah, make it even better, more efficient. I know that MOCAP also represents the Pacific, has a lot of small island and developing states as well. So maybe what we are developing for the Caribbean can also work for the Pacific subregion, for instance. So I'm hoping for an exchange on those kinds of initiatives as well in the future. And with this, we go to the next slides, and all that rests um, is to thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
네, 감사드립니다. 피터 실링 회장님 다시 한 번 더 박수 한번 주시겠습니까? 아, 네. 굉장히 멀리서 안동까지 방문해 주셔서 굉장히 귀중한 발표를 해 주셔서 다시 한번 감사를 드리겠습니다. 모락의 활동이나 이런 것들을 저희들도 사실 처음 듣는 기회이기 때문에 향후에 다양한 어떤 협력 방안이나 이런 것들이 같이 모색될 수 있을 걸로 이렇게 판단이 됩니다. 특히 한국 같은 경우는 지금 이 지금 회의에도 이 전체를 지원하는 어떤 문화재청이나 혹은 유네스코 한국위원회나 혹은 다양한 어떤 그 멤버들이 같이 이렇게 활동하면서 다양한 방법들을 모색하고 있는 그런 그 하나의 장이 오늘 같이 보시고 있는 어떤 현상이라고 보셔도 될 것 같습니다. 예, 그러면 오늘 의장님 마지막으로 그 현재 유네스코 아크모 의장으로 활동하고 계시고요. 멀리 세네갈에서 오셨습니다. 파파 모하르 디오프 의장님을 모시고 의장님의 인사 말씀과 그리고 또 현재 아크모의 어떤 준비사항 또 활동사항들을 좀 들어보는 시간을 갖도록 하겠습니다. 예, 파파 모하르 디오프 의장님 모시겠습니다.
Thank you, Lee. I would like, before all, apologize for my bad English, but the main thing is that you understand what I want to say. Thank you very much. Okay. This item, fostering a culture of collaboration in the field of documentary heritage, I will speak about the role of Memory of the World program device. Okay. Okay. You listen me? Okay. This is the content of my presentation. There will be an introduction. The first part is introduction of ArcMove. The second part, importance of the culture of collaboration in the field of documentary heritage. The third part, current mechanism and tools for a culture of collaboration in the field of heritage within the framework of the Memory of the World program, which will be subdivided by 6 points. This is the first point is the UNESCO 2015 recommendation, the memory of the world registers, the UNESCO Gigji Prize, the memory of the world regional committees, International Center for Documentary Heritage, ICDH, and the UNESCO Knowledge Center. Next. Next, please. Next slide. As an introduction, I can say that in the 1090, uh, the main global challenge for documentary heritage was uh, how to make it better preserved and accessible. So, Mr. Federico Mayor, Director General of UNESCO, you correct, had the magnificent idea to bring together in 2092 a group of experts in Warsaw, in Poland, to reflect on the manner to face it. This meeting culminated in the same year with the creation of the Memory of the World program and was the prelude of the adoption of the 2015 recommendation concerning the preservation and the accessibility of documentary heritage, including digital heritage. In its, in its operational system, 3 regional committees are currently being created: MOCAP, MOLAC, and ACMOV. Next, please. Next, please. Of course, originally, the program's mission was to contribute to the identification of documentary heritage, is better promotion, its better promotion, its promotion, and its wider accessibility. However, it must to be it must be recognized that through its founding text and its operational mechanism, it is also the mission of contribution to collaboration between the stockholders, institutionals, and individual of the world's documentary heritage. In the operational system, there are 3 regional committees. I said that. Next, please. One of it is the first one, the first part of the presentation of ArcMove. Of the 3 committees, ArcMove is the latest to be created. It was set up in 2007, but is only really functional from 2021 after the General Assembly for revitalization held on May 26, 27, and 28. This consultation resulted in the revision of the basic text of ACMOV and the election of an executive committee for 4 years. The executive committee made up of 9 members is responsibility for, please, next slide. Next slide. To conduct awareness raising activities in Africa region on the Memory of the World program and in Africa's documentary heritage. To encourage the creation of Memory of the World national committees throughout Africa. To contribute to implementing the work of the Memory of the World national committees, to promote, facilitate, and monitor the program Memory of the World in the African region, to plan a regional Memory of the World register and determine its selection and inclusion criteria. Next. To represent Africa at the international level, to support African nomination to the Memory of the World International Register, to encourage a good representation of Africa's documentary heritage on the Memory of the World International Register, to encourage and support the submission of African nominations for the UNESCO Gigi Prize. I stop there to inform you that an NGO, African NGO, won in 2018 the Gigi Prize. It was the Savama, which deals with Timbuktu manuscripts. Next, please. Today, part two, importance of the culture of collaboration in the field of documentary heritage. Today, among the challenges facing documentary heritage, stockholders is the central issue of international and regional collaboration or cooperation. And from the point of view, from this point of view, MOPCAP, MOCAP, measuring the importance of the issue, bring together today the three regional committees to initiate reflection on how foster a culture of cooperation around documentary heritage. Next, please. One of the founding ideals of UNESCO is the culture of peace in the minds of men to eradicate wars. Indeed, it proclaims in its constitutive act, since war began in the mind of man, it is in the mind of man that the defenses of peace must be erected. The culture of peace necessary has its seed in the culture of collaboration in the field of documentary heritage. Why? Next, please. Because for there to be sustainable, because for there to be sustainable peace, there needs to be mutual respect for human cultures, which will go through respect for global cultural diversity. Indeed, in the recitals of 2005 UNESCO convention, it is recalled that culture diversity which flourish in the framework of democracy, tolerance, social justice, and mutual respect between peoples and cultures is essential for peace and security at the local, national, and international levels. Next, please. However, the documentary heritage is a powerful vehicle through the edges for the expression of various human cultures. Thus, the strengthening of the culture of collaboration in this particular heritage of heritage area of heritage, accessible without hindrance to all, is a fundamental lever to contribute to the recognition of otherness, to the dialogue of and to the mutual understanding of cultures and peoples, and consequently the promotion of sustainable peace. Next, please. In our opinion, in the field of documentary heritage, fostering the culture of collaboration requires existing mechanisms and tools at the national, regional, multilateral, and international levels. Among these mechanisms and tools, we can distinguish those identified within the framework of the Memory of the World program. Next, please. The constitutive device of the program presents current mechanism and tools for a culture of collaboration in the field of documentary heritage, coordinated by the UNESCO Unit for Documentary Heritage at the UNESCO headquarters. These are the 2005 recommendation, the general guidelines, the international and regional memory of the world registers, the UNESCO Jigji Prize, the national committees, the International Center for Documentary Heritage, ICDH, and the knowledge centers. First, concerning the 2000 recommendation, this recommendation is for documentary heritage what the conventions are for the other kinds of heritage. Its implementation presents a moral obligation for all states of the 195 member states and the 8 associate members, since it is their emanation and tacit expression of commitment. From this point of view, it is to a normative instrument of binding nature. Next, please. Point 5 of the recommendation is entirely reserved for national and international cooperation in the field of documentary heritage. It encourages member states to support exchange of data, publication, and information resulting from research, as well as the training and exchange of specialist personnel and equipment. Next, please. To promote the organization of meetings, courses, working groups, and specific subjects such as cataloging, risk management, identification of endangered element of documentary heritage, and cutting-edge research. To encourage cooperation with international and regional associations, institutions, and professional organizations dealing with the preservation and accessibility of documentary heritage. To facilitate the exchange between countries of copies of elements of the documentary heritage. Next, please. To establish cooperation on an international scale in order to safeguard the endangered element of the documentary heritage, to strengthen their cooperation with the Memory of the World program by establishing national committees and registers. Next, please. The principle, the principle of the memory of the world registers is to ensure good visibility to documentary heritage registered therein, and to make it accessible at national, regional, and international levels. Accepting to present a documentary asset for inclusion in a register is in a register, a national register, international register, and yes, and international religion, and is an eminent act of willingness to cooperate, because when the property is registered and benefits from the memory of the word label logo, I'm meaning, it becomes a property for all humanity and accessible for all without hindrance. In, in a collaborative framework, there are inscribed elements uh, are under the vigilant protection of the memory of the world program and the international community. Next. The regional committees are mechanisms which, among other functions, is to develop a collaborative system both in the intra-regional level and at the inter-regional level. For the international level, point 5131 of the Memory of the World guidelines, general guidelines, provides that, I cite, regional regional committee of regional committees of cooperative and are structures bringing together voluntary in a voluntary basis national memory of the world committees belonging to the same geographical area or having similar interests, as for example, common culture. Next, please. Point, point 5133 reinforces this regional collaborative framework with the organization of cooperative activities, such training workshops on selected topics. At the interregional level, the three regional committees, mainly the elders, MOCAP and MOLAC. You have to write twice MOLAC. The last one is MOCAP, MOLAC. Sorry for that. So, at the international level, the three regional committees, mainly the elders, MOLAC, and MOCAP, often organize interregional cooperation activities with workshop, capacity building, conferences, sharing of good practice. I stop here to express a wish we have in ACMOV to organize once, maybe next year, an international meeting, an interregional meeting, and we hope after our national and regional contribution in Africa, we hope also that Korea, China, the ICDH and UNESCO help us to do that. The current MOVCAP event in Andong and the next MOLAC workshop in September. No, there is there is something. Go ahead. There is something here because I mentioned the Rio de Janeiro. I know it was organized by MOLAC. It is placed here. The current event in Andong and the MOLAC workshop in September 2023 in Rio de Janeiro to strengthen the capacity, the capacities of 5 Portuguese-speaking countries of Africa to boost their representation in the international register are recent illustration of this willingness of cooperation. Next. The objective now about the UNESCO Jaggi Prize. The objectives of the Jaggi Prize are eminently focused on the culture of cooperation in the field of better preservation and accessibility to the world's documentary heritage. Indeed, in this case, it is an invitation to the international sharing of know-how, soft skills, or meritorious effort unique to individual or to an individual or an institution. Sharing many acts and activities that can serve example of good practice for all documentary institution and all stakeholders in documentary heritage around around the world. Next, please. The International Center for Documentary Heritage, ICDH, a Category 2 centers of UNESCO, the ICDH has the slogan, the International Center for Documentary Heritage of UNESCO, where the past and the present communicate through documentary heritage and open a place of sharing with the world. This openness to sharing with the world along reflects the desire of inclusive collaboration. Next, please. As far as ArtMove is concerned, this is materialized concretely through 2 major acts. The holding of many online meetings and led in there is a mistake here. Led in November 2022 to free purchase the domain and the domain name and the rent of 10 years. I want to mean that I wanted to illustrate the help from ICDH for ACMO in the field of the like 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Yes, 5 minutes. Okay. The second point is the signing memory of the of memorandum of understanding whose main clause is the establishment of partnership and raising awareness of documentary heritage of Africa in the world, and the introduction of knowledge and the related project within the framework of the development of Memory of the World program, led uh, uh, by ArtMove through the production, maintenance, and promotion of the website. Next, please. The contribution of Africa in the partnership on the website has been the construction and the graphic charter by African Library and International Information Association and institutions in the Republic of Ghana, of which our Secretary General, Dr. Elena Asamoah Hassan, is the Director General. Large windows are opened to the website to these two benefactors institutions. Next, please, to win time. Next. There is also a system of collaboration in UNESCO Knowledge Center. Next, please. You will have my contribution. You have in the book, and I'll give the presentation for sharing to all. Next, please. Next. Yes, it is the conclusion. What we can essentially return from the presentation is that the strengthening of the culture of collaboration in the field of documentary heritage is intimately linked to that in the field of peace. Collaboration between documentary heritage stakeholders thus meets the founding objective of the United Nations organization and its Agency for Education, Science, and Culture, UNESCO, of which the Memory of the World is a branch. Next, please. Next, this point of our presentation, moreover, is an anticipation of the reflection which we are invited by for the Cheongju conference on perspective on the contribution of Africa in a documentary research network for consolidation and promotion of peace in the world. Proposal of a creation of an African working group targeting the nomination, risks, heritage, management, and training of professionals. Next, and I think that it is all. Thank you very much. And once again, apologize.
다시 한번 더 말씀, 예, 고맙습니다. 예, 고맙습니다. 네, 멀리서 오셔서 제가 시간을 이렇게 빨리 컨트롤하지 못해서 죄송합니다만은 그래도 끝까지 좀 재밌는 내용으로 들어봐 주셔서 감사를 드리겠습니다. 저희 시간이 조금 한 15분 정도 딜레이가 좀 되고 있습니다. 그래서 1부 세션은 지금 저희들 조금 마치고 두 번째 회의를 2시 30분부터 시작하는 걸로 그렇게 정리를 하겠습니다. 조금 땡기겠습니다. 그래서 2시 30분까지 10한 2, 3분 정도 큰 브레이크 하시고 다시 30분의 이 자리로 돌아와 주시면 고맙겠습니다. 네, 잠깐 쉬시겠습니다.
So this book I mentioned, it's available online as well, but I think it's a good addition to your small library upstairs in the other building. So be inspired to read what other countries do. Already likes my game. I thought we could play it. But yeah. We also conversation when you're explaining right. I really get that's also the way
잘못해서 이렇게 많이 좀 늦춰졌는데요. 우리 발표 시간을 조금 지켜주시면 감사드리겠습니다. 두 번째 시간은 저희들이 지금 그 세계기능산 지역위원회의 도전과 제안이라는 그 주제로 현재 그 몰락에서 활동하고 계시는 존 앙구스 마틴 몰락 부회장님하고 그다음에 어, 모캡 사무국장으로 계시는 니나 모레 발표를 듣도록 하겠습니다. 우선 카리브해 기록유산의 보존과 홍보라는 제목으로 존 앙구스 마틴의 어, 몰락 부회장님의 발표를 청해 듣도록 하겠습니다. 이쪽으로 오시면
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me here. I guess I'm going to continue with some of what Peter was talking about um, in looking at the MOLAC, specifically at the Caribbean region. Next slide. Next one. Um, we could skip this one as well. We talked about this one before. Next slide. Okay. Like the other regions, there's a great diversity among MOLAC countries with respect to size, population, resources, capacity, etc. And that is a big issue, as in the Pacific region, Asia Pacific region, and it is for the Caribbean as well, and Africa. Though all of these countries were former colonies, those that have been independent longest, thus having longer developed knowledge and heritage institutions, have been at the forefront of applications and successful nominations. Next slide. Here, this is just from the book that was produced on MOLAC, showing some of the nominations, the successful nominations to the regional list. As you can see, it's not that clear, but not all countries have been able to make nominations, applications, and that is where the conversation is going to be about. Next slide, please. The countries of the Caribbean which had younger or less knowledge heritage institutions have had less representations on the list. Even within the group, the larger countries with longer periods of independence and stronger older institutions are better represented. It is the small island developing states that are the least represented, as their documentary history is in the worst state of organization and preservation, and their knowledge heritage institutions are the least developed. Next slide. Here is a list of the Caribbean islands, countries, and their number of inscriptions. And we still have a few, the ones that both Peter and I represent, at 0. And if you look at Trinidad and Tobago at 6, Jamaica at 3, Barbados at 6, those are the longer independent islands in the Caribbean, and they had longer institutions established. Next slide. Probably one of the most successful avenues for submissions have been the joint endeavors. These submissions, because of the region's similar history of slavery and colonialism, provide the best opportunities for successful nominations. Small island developing states, which may have not been able to submit on their own because of their limited resources and preservation capacity, can more easily be part of these joint nominations, as the documents may be housed in European institutions. Next slide. These are just a list of some of the joint nominations that have been successful to date. Next. In 2009, several Caribbean countries and the UK nominated a joint inscription for the International Register that was inscribed in 2011, Registers of Slaves of the British Caribbean, 1817 to 1834. These are lists of enslaved peoples in all of these colonies. From 1817 to 1834, the list was meant to stop the importation of new enslaved peoples from Africa. This list was also used at the end of 1834 to pay the owners of the enslaved money in order to free them. The enslaved people got none, hence the reason why we have issues of reparations today. The countries included Bahamas, Belize, the Bermudas, Dominica, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, and the UK, St. Kitts and Nevis. These countries in the bottom were not included, and they can easily be added to the list. Next slide. And these are just some of the examples of the nominations, of the successful nominations. Next slide. Again, more of these nominations that have been successful. Next. The silver men, West Indian laborers on the Panama Canal. The Caribbean people helped build the Panama Canal, and many immigrants from these islands went to Panama. And this is from all of these islands: Barbados, Jamaica, Panama, St. Lucia, US, and UK. Those are the countries that were actually, that put forward the nomination. Um, Countries to be added, Grenada and St. Vincent. So these are, again, and it's possible that when these nominations were in the process, they were not able to get in contact with the other countries for whatever reason. Because again, countries like Grenada and St. Vincent, well, St. Vincent has a archives, but Grenada does not have the institutions necessary to promote these nominations. Next. Um, these are just the examples from the text from our book. Next. Land registry deeds, record books were inscribed 2009 Barbados, Jamaica inscribed 2014, the patents land grants. These are probably the most complete data we have on land transactions throughout the region, and not just land, but also people. Enslaved people would be found in these deeds. And all of the English-speaking Caribbean would have had those as well. They actually are comparable types of documents throughout the entire Caribbean and Latin America. Um, Only Barbados and Jamaica have put forward theirs, and almost all of the other islands could become part of this as well. Next. And this is just the one from Jamaica. Next. There has been a diversity of nominations across subjects and types of documentary heritage. These have to continue to be representative of the region, and there's just a list of the types of nominations and what categories their subject headings they fall under. Next. There needs to be support for, in order for us to really look at how we can move forward, how we can get more countries to put forward applications and be successful nominations. Here's what I think we need to do. There needs to be more support for knowledge heritage institutions across the region. Heritage knowledge institutions are inadequately provided for, most functioning at their basic levels. Many countries, particularly in the Eastern Caribbean, lack adequate national archives and libraries. Next. These, there needs to be support for these institutions. Some smaller islands like Grenada lacked even a national library where they had a small archives, while its museum has been closed since 2020. Small islands lack records management acts that would feed into archives, and others have no archives at all. For example, Grenada. This is, go back, sorry. This is what the current National Library in Grenada looks like. It has been closed since 2011 because the workers said it was, the working conditions in it caused it to be closed, and it has not been reopened since. Next. There needs to be support for continuous capacity building and knowledge heritage institutions across the region. Often, adequately trained staff are few in many smaller countries. Strengthen the skills and abilities of staff and provide training in the processes for strengthening these institutions. Next. There needs to be support for the preservation of documentary heritage. Educate on the importance of documentary heritage and the need for the preservation of records. Invest in the safeguarding of documentary heritage. These are images from the registrar's office in Grenada, and that's the current state of the records. And these are our most valuable records. Next. There needs to be support for the application process. Provide the necessary support to institutions interested in applying for nominations but lack specific skills to successfully complete applications. Identify documentary heritage of outstanding universal value in their collections or from private collections that may be of regional significance. Encourage institutions to collaborate with other institutions that may have items from the same collections to submit a joint nomination. Most of the records from many of the smaller islands are in European archives, either France or the UK. Both of Grenada was colonized by both the French and the British, so all our documents are basically in European archives. Next. And these are looking at the benefits of nomination, collaboration with regional international institutions, create greater access to the public, focus attention on particular collections, documents, historical, cultural events, etc. Promotion exposure, being on the radar on a regional and international global level. Access to funding, expertise, rescue, preservation initiatives, being included in research in the Molac Observatory. Next. There needs to be support for existing and new national committees. Strengthen existing committees by establishing a check-in process to monitor them, especially the newly formed ones. Encourage the formation of new national committees. Explore the possibility of creating sub-regional committees where small states may lack adequate numbers. Next. Thank you.
네, 다시 한 번 더 박수 주시면 감사하겠습니다. 사회자 입장에서 시간을 절약해 주셔서 대단히 감사드리고요. 사실은 그보다 더 중요한 발표였음에도 불구하고 많은 시간을 드리지 못해서 좀 아쉬운 점도 있습니다. 그 다음 발표로는 그 세계기록유산 아시아태평양 지역위원회가 갖고 있는 도전과 기회에 대해서 작년부 저저 유네스코 목협 사무국장을 맡고 계시는 우리 리난 모로님의 발표를 듣도록 하겠습니다.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Lee, Chairman Cuive, Peter Schooling, and Papa, and John for those presentations. So today I have been asked to speak on the challenges and opportunities that we have at the Memory of the World Committee for Asia and the Pacific. Maybe if we could get my presentation, it will be easier to follow. Although you can also follow it in the booklet. So just as Peter and John mentioned about Latin America and the Caribbean, Asia and the Pacific is very diverse culturally, linguistically. There are various subregions ranging from South Asia, Central Asia, East Asia, the Mekong countries, in maritime Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand, the Pacific, and it also includes Iran. Altogether, we have 46 countries in the Asia Pacific region. Next slide, please. So just to give an overview of the national committees in Asia and the Pacific, we have these countries, Australia, Cambodia, China, Indonesia, Iran, Malaysia, Mongolia, New Zealand. You can't see it here, but if you look at the booklet, the ones in bold are the ones that also have a national register. Because even if there is a national committee in a country, it doesn't mean that there is forcibly a national register. Next slide, please. So these are the other countries. So in total, there are 15 countries out of the 46 in Asia Pacific that have a national committee for the memory of the world, and only half of those have a national register. So just in that itself, we can see a challenge already emerging in the existence of national committees for the memory of the world. And this makes it all the more significant that today we signed an MOU specifying collaboration to develop more national committees globally. Next slide, please. In terms of Asia Pacific inscriptions on the Memory of the World Register, on the international one, the number was raised to 490 this year, and 109, which raises the number in the Asia Pacific to 119. At the moment, on the MOCAP regional register, we have 65 inscriptions because we added 9 inscriptions last November, right here in the wonderful city of Andong. Next slide, please. In terms of the MOCAP regional guidelines, how they actually mirror the Memory of the World General Guidelines, except that we apply regional variations wherever we can. But the criteria is pretty much the same, and the management process and structure are also similar to that of the International Register. Next slide, please. The following is invaluable information we got from Yan Boss, giving us an overview of the differences between the previous guidelines and the most recent version of the guidelines, which show that the program in itself has become more robust and contains more facets and has had more experience with procedures throughout its previous implementation. Since then, also, there have been regional and national committees that have been established, and there have been new phenomena, namely digital documentary heritage and new technologies. And also, there was the the 2015 adoption of the recommendation on documentary heritage, including in digital form. Next slide, please. So in terms of the MOCAP guidelines, no longer talking about the international guidelines, one of the changes is requiring a letter of support from the National Commission of UNESCO or the body in charge of UNESCO. So how is this an opportunity? Well, what this offers, it gives increased engagement from the member state in documentary heritage, because asking for this letter makes them pay attention to the Memory of the World program and gets them more actively involved. However, a challenge that we have noticed in implementing the Memory of the World program, at least in the case of the Asia Pacific region, is that asking for this letter um, there's an issue giving access to the program for marginalized or indigenous communities. And there's also the risk that the member state will prioritize specific groups. So there's a pro and a con, but next slide, please. There's also the limits of 3 nominations per country. So this is an opportunity because it allows for a greater balance between smaller developing states and those with a larger geographic region or more resources. However, this has become recently unclear and undefined for how to proceed with associate members or non-state nominators. So just speaking from recent experience, but yeah. Next slide, please. There's also allowing for contestations. So the positive in that is that provides an opportunity for somebody to suggest a joint nomination if they want to join it, or to bring additional information in case there was something that was missed. But it can also allow for, it also politicizes the procedures a little bit. Next slide, please. In terms of implementing program activities, well, this is a challenge that was faced by all of us. Has been the COVID-19 pandemic, and as well as project funding. For example, the steep rise in traveling costs. How much it would have cost to come here pre-COVID and the cost to come here now has dramatically changed. And so flying people over from across the Asia Pacific region or from the small island developing states in the Pacific, it was already costly, and now it's exorbitant. There's also a language barrier, which you shared in Latin America and the Caribbean. Proficiency in English is quite a challenge, so we often need to get translators and interpreters, but we often need, but if we could, it would be ideal if we could have for multiple languages, actually. Another challenge has been maintaining the database of contacts for the national committees for the memory of the world, or even the national commissions for UNESCO themselves. There's staff rotations, or this email stops working, and so it requires regular communications to keep your database up to date. And even if you try to, you will find that at your next newsletter, you'll get another 10 emails that have bounced back that worked a month before. So, and I'm sure some of you can can sympathize with this. Next slide, please. Um, there is, well, as I mentioned before, not enough national committees for such a diverse region. So we would like to work more to increase that number. And also, there needs to be more engagement with the small island developing states in the Pacific. We this comes up quite often. I don't know why it doesn't appear here, but normally have a third bullet point. It's probably a technical issue on my part. Also affecting the region are risks as well. So natural disasters, especially floods, earthquake, and tsunamis. There are also military coups in this region, ethnic conflicts, and protests. So this can all affect programming. Next slide, please. Um, but amidst all these challenges, we started doing hybrid activities. So while it's always preferable to have activities in person, we're now accustomed to having online participation in case that's needed. There is we've included gender and indigenous communities in the nomination form, and we hope that this can attract more attention to the program. Um, and there has been renewed and increased interest from national commissions, and as well in the creation of national committees for the memory of the world. So that's all good news. Next slide, please. Um, in terms of opportunities from collaborations between the regional committees for the memory of the world, as Chairman Quibe mentioned, we produced this children's book, but it would be nice to expand it and include, because this is mostly on Asia Pacific with some international example, but if this could include more items from Africa and Latin America and the Caribbean, that would, to have something more global, that would be great. And also in 2025, we will be celebrating the 10th anniversary of the inscription of the Asian and African Conference archives. So that could also be something that we could work on together. Next slide, please. As Chairman Quibe shared, we have the Memory of the World Women in History website and materials. All this content that we have should also be developed to include more content from Latin America, Caribbean, and Africa. Although here we have Barbados. Next slide, please. And so these are just thoughts from the top of my head, but we're here to discuss more of these today. That's why we're all gathered in this room. There are archives and documentation related to colonial administration, architectural drawings. I'm sure we can maybe find something. Archives on the movements of goods and peoples, post-colonial development, joint independence movements, South-South cooperation. I discovered that there's an organization of solidarity with the people of Asia, Africa, and Latin America, founded in Cuba. And this was just doing some search on Google. Maybe Austronesian and oral history and oral literature of Mauritius and maritime Southeast Asia. So these are just some ideas that we can all work from. I also saw that there was the activity that involved the Portuguese-speaking countries of Africa that were assembled in Rio de Janeiro. if next time Timor-Leste could participate, as they are a Portuguese-speaking nation, that could also be great. Next slide, please. So ways forward. Well, I guess this is why we're all here today, to collect ideas and promote our interregional collaboration, which we could also propose at our next general meeting in 2024. And it would be great to facilitate joint nominations through our partners and stakeholders in the region and globally. Next slide, please. I think that's it, though. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the ideas and future discussions.
네, 감사합니다. 다시 한번 박수 부탁드리겠습니다. 네, 이번에 그 두 분 발표자께서 시간을 너무 잘 지켜주셔서 이후의 시간이 굉장히 좀 원활하게 이렇게 진행이 될 것 같습니다. 아쉽게도 그 아프리카 쪽에서 원래 참석하시기로 하셨던 분이 참석을 못하셔서 저희들이 아프리카 쪽 얘기를 못 들어보는 게 좀 아쉽기는 합니다만, 어쨌든 지금은 이제 라틴 아메리카 쪽과 또 카리비안 쪽, 그리고 저희 아시아 태평양 지역이 가지고 있는 어떤 문제, 그리고 지금 지향하고 있는 고민들이 잘 발표가 된 것 같습니다. 아마 이런 고민들은 이후에 토론 시간을 통해서 조금 그 의미 있는 논의들과 또 향후의 방안들이 저는 도출될 수 있을 거로 이렇게 생각을 합니다. 그러면 그 다음 발표로 넘어가도록 하겠습니다. 저희들 다음 발표는 오늘 계속 좀 논의가 좀 되었습니다만, 이게 또 다양한 어떤 국가위원회 관계를 어떻게 하실지에 대한 다양한 고민들을 좀 가지고 계시는 걸로 제가 알고 있습니다. 그래서 그 발표를 좀 청해서 듣도록 그렇게 하겠습니다. 세계경제가 한국위원회 서경호 위원장님이십니다.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about and share my experience with uh, my experience in the operation of the National MOW Committee in the Republic of Korea. Actually, I reflect that the talk about the role and challenge of National Committee had been very few in the past. Probably on the occasion of this nature, I think I might be in Korea the first speaker who is talking about the nature of the National Committee. Well, even though it is phrased this way, National MOW Committee and the general guidelines of the MOW, we are calling this committee as National MOW Committee of Republic of Korea because we need to leave some room for another Korea that is existing undeniably as a political entity, as a member of the United Nations in another half of this peninsula. So if we use Korean National MOW Committee, then I think there could be there can be a strong repercussion from the North in case they establish their national committee. So we call it National MOW Committee of Republic of Korea. Next slide, please. National Committee is well discussed, encouraged, and urged in some cases by International Advisory Committee as well as MOCAP bureaus. According to the general guidelines of the MOW, the National Committee is a what is that? I cannot read it. Autonomous entity operating at the national level. This autonomous becomes a problematic word in my talk, and I'll go back to this word and later on. But even though the general guidelines have different phrases stipulating the roles, missions, and the aspirations for national committee, to me, I think we need amply define what is about, what is this committee is about. And I would like to define it as an advisory committee, advisory entity committee organized and managed by World Heritage Division, Cultural Heritage Administration of the Republic of Korea, that undertakes activities related with and in support of the UNESCO's Memory of the World program. This specifies that my definition specifies that this committee is not autonomous, but a part of the operating body of the Memory of World related business in Korea, that is Cultural Heritage Administration. There is reason to say that way because this committee has been established in 2021 under the legal background, legal backup, uh, I mean, prepared by the Cultural Heritage Administration. As you, I'm sorry, next slide, please. This committee was established under the order number 568 by Cultural Heritage Administration, which stipulates mission, the modality and parameter of activities, and even the number of members within the order. According to the um, legislation, we are to have 10 members in the committee, um, and certain number of members should come from related government agencies, whereas a small number of seats are allocated for civilian experts. Um, this is a basic architecture, and the operation is supported by the secretariat, which is taken by uh, the a division of the Cultural Heritage Administration. So, in this young and fragile committee, established in 2021, we are in the middle of the first term of the membership that started 21 through and expires in 2000, 2025. We have four members from academia, university professors, including myself, even though I'm not, well, at this moment, a employed professor. From government agencies, we have 5 members, and we have 1 member from UNESCO Commission, who is serving as a chair of MOCAP now. And since we only had 2 years of history, experiences, or actually what we have done is quite limited. It's a selection process uh, for this potential submission to MOW registry last year. And no, for MOCAP last year. And this year, the selection process for next round of nomination cycle of the Memory of the World program is going on. It seems to me, reflecting 2 years experience, it seems to me that the selection process of the potential nomination for either MOW International Register or MOCAP's Regional Register takes a considerable portion of the workload of this committee, because other than this selection process, even though there are various different fields of activities allocated or existing as opportunities for the committee, the committee actually has no willingness or no uh, capability to take over any given projects that have been carried out by other units of related bodies. The burden of the taking charge of the selection process is very heavy, had been very heavy, and I think it's going to be also heavy from the next round of nomination. Next slide, please. Well, simply put it, let me show you the number. In Korea, this is a competition within Korea. So there has been 6, 5, 5 from 2008, 6, 8, and 10. But 2012, it jumped to 10, and 14 jumped to 13. And 2016, we had 10 submissions for the selection process itself. We all know that only 2 nominations can be submitted for international register, which means that within Korea, the competition was fierce. And if you pass through the competition on national level, then there is a certain belief among the nominators or potential nominators that for international register, it would be easier than national process of selection. So this is one of the most important things the committee is undertaking now. And importance of this selection process might be peculiar because, well, national committees are working under different conditions, under different circumstances. So my experience or the experience of the Korean National Committee for MOL cannot be generalized as an usual case for every national committees. But selection process is very important for Korean National Committee because um, increasingly we are uh, witnessing the emergence of the submissions of freshly organized archives pertaining to immediate or recent memories, which means that many NGOs or nominating institutions are trying to piece together fragmentary documents into a body of archive um, with a focusing on a particular theme of recent event. The danger, the risk is that the archives of this nature is often showing some propensity of ideological or political orientation. Sometimes archives are organized to claim to justify certain ideological or political propensity. And National Committee in Korea has a mission to secure the integrity of submission for international or MOCAP register, and therefore it includes the mission of preventing the submission of nominations being charged with ideological or political aspirations. This is very delicate work, and I don't know, other national committees in other countries might encounter the same nature of the problems, but in Korea, that has been a serious problem in the past decade. And I think we are going to encounter more of this kind of problems in the future, because we are, well, witnessing the increase of the new, freshly organized archives on the memories of immediate or recent past. Um, with that, we are defining one more mission, which is a very, very uh, urgent now. We are trying to develop national committee as a platform to nurture younger scholars and experts as a group of next generation volunteer group who would dedicate for the development of the more related activities. Well, on the international level, on the regional level, we are encountering the same problem. The first generation volunteer group who had designed, developed, and actually had taken the program into maturity during the past 30 years are now aging. And we are having difficulties in finding those group of people, though very small in scale, they are who are willing to devote themselves for the development of this important program. So, National Committee in Korea is now defining two different missions in parallel. First is to secure or guarantee even the integrity of the submitted nomination to international and regional register. On the other hand, in parallel, we are trying to nurture the emergence of the new group of younger generation who would succeed the working of this in this program. Um, Still, there is a challenge. Well, we have lots of national committees in Asia Pacific. We have 15 member states who had national committees. But there is a very profound question as to whether national committee can be really autonomous. In Korea, in Korean National Committee is not autonomous. It's a part of the government operation. But that doesn't matter, because if government is willing to provide support for the development of more related activities inside Korea, then civilian experts are more than willing to cooperate. So at present, this committee is being operated and under the relationship of mutual cooperation between cultural heritage administration and the committee. And also there is a support from Ministry of Foreign Affairs whenever necessary. However, it is far from being autonomous. Whenever there is a conflict of interest, this committee finds itself still remaining as an advisory committee. So I would like to hear from other national committees about their relative positions within the power structure of the member state. And second question, in the international community, does national committee means anything? Does, for example, does UNESCO MOW Secretariat regards National Committee as working partner? I'm very doubtful about that. And if I'm right. If National Committee is not regarded as an important working partner of the operating body of this program, then there is no reason to encourage the establishment of the National Committee. And if it is so much emphasized in the general guidelines that was revised in 2021, then I would like to question whether UNESCO has any particular measure to encourage the widen or broaden the activity sphere of the national committees. For this question, I'm also quite doubtful. So, as far as I know, and as far as my 2 years experience as chair of the the National MOW Committee of the Republic of Korea goes on, the committee exists there as a very good excuse of promoting MOW business, or even we can say MOW and enterprise. However, there are many, many discrepancies, and the extent, let's say, a parameter of roles that is undertaken by each individual national committees from a member state to another, the, that might be different story. So may I suggest that the regional committee may provide some mechanisms or functional or working principle to have to get together all the available national committees and try to find a way to activate the role and missions of national committees to its maximum. I think this is one of the challenges we are to discuss within Korea in the coming years. Before then, um, well, the committee will devote itself, its capacity to selection process and some other minor businesses related, but whenever necessary. I would stop here and I will be pleased to answer if there is any question during the discussion period. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
예, 다시 한 번 더 박수 부탁드리겠습니다. 사실은 새로 이렇게 국가위원회가 만들어지면서 많은 고민과 관계들에 대한 어떤 그 고민을 지금 가지고 오늘 발표를 해주신 것 같습니다. 아마 이 논의는 여러 가지 특히 이제 지역위원회 차원에서 아니면 그 지역위원회 어떤 그 협 차원에서 한번 좀 깊이 있게 좀 논의가 돼야 될 문제라고 생각이 되고요. 특히 이제 앞으로 어떤 한국의 그 세계일용유산 사업의 어떤 발전을 위해서 우리 어떤 방식으로 해야 될지에 대한 고민들도 아마 같이 담겨 있는 게 아닌가 이렇게 생각을 합니다. 오늘 주어진 마지막 발표입니다. 지금 모캡 등재 소위원회 위원으로 새로 위촉되신 우리 아이자 킨조 코즈베코바 박사님을 모시고요. 지금 이제 중앙아시아 세계기록유산 사업이 가지고 있는 어떤 도전과 또 어떤 기회들이 있는지에 대한 이야기를 조금 들어보는 시간입니다. 이번에 모캡 RSC에 처음 참석하셔서 굉장히 좀 즐겁게 이렇게 시간을 보내고 계신 걸로 제가 알고 있는데 오늘 발표 청해 들으면서 또 소개도 하고 이런 시간을 갖도록 하겠습니다. 발표 청해 듣겠습니다.
Dear everyone, first of all, I would like to begin from expressing my gratitude to the organizers of this Memory of the World Interregional Conference for the superb organization and warm hospitality, which I believe we are all enjoying all these days, and for the opportunity to share my thoughts of the challenges and opportunities for the program in Central Asian region. Next slide, please. As one can observe from the map, Central Asia countries actually includes 5 countries which were formerly part of the Soviet Union, and we still have a lot. Ready? I don't know how to make it. Can you hear me well now? Yeah, okay, let's just see. Maybe I can just hold it. Is it better now? Thank you so much. So among these 5 countries of Central Asia, you could see that 4 of them are Turkic-speaking nations. This is Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Kazakhstan. And one of them is primarily speaks Persian. This is Tajikistan. Then, in terms of geographical locations, to the eastern side of Central Asia lies China, particularly this is autonomous region of Xinjiang. And in some research, scientific articles, you could find that Afghanistan is also included as a part of Central Asia. In other sources related to academic research, this area of Central Asia is often referred as Inner Asia, but this term we could say it encompasses a more extensive geographic expanse, which includes Mongolia, Manchuria, and some parts of Iran. In general, we can say that this region, steeped in history, having witnessed a myriad of significant events and processes, and each of the major world religions like Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, and Zoroastrianism, they has left their marks here. The artistic legacy of Central Asia is also equally impressive with various media, which include sculptures, ceramics, cave paintings flourishing in the region. Next slide, please. In about Memory of the World International Register, we could say that each of these Central Asian countries have their documentary heritage, which is inscribed in the International Register. Uzbekistan, in particular, it has also one item in the regional list and one joint item with Tajikistan. And in comparison with other regions in Asia Pacific, you could say that it's not that many items, which also speaks a lot about the necessity to promote this program in Central Asia. Next slide, please. If we discuss the key institutions which are, let's say, dedicated to preserve documentary heritage in their respective ways, we can highlight several of them. And first of all, these are national libraries because they play a significant role in housing rare books, publications, printing materials, newspapers, and manuscripts. National and local archives, they also hold a diverse range of documents covering different historical periods in these countries. And another custodian of documentary heritage is research institutions, and notably the National Academies of Sciences, where we have substantial manuscript funds. And in addition, we can say that there are a lot of specific institutions, like, for example, the Presidential Foundation in Republic of Kazakhstan, which also focuses on digitalizing and sharing documentary heritage with the public. And nowadays, in all the Central Asian countries, there is a huge movement of which is called decolonization movement, and there is increasing interest to historical heritage and historical past, reconsidering and rethinking what happened to these countries during the Soviet Union period. And there are a lot of small entities like NGOs and research centers and different academics and researchers who are very much interested in understanding and very often just opening some, let's say, very sensitive documents and speaking about dark pages of the history. Next slide, please. Regarding the role, regarding the work which is now in progress, we could say in all the Central Asian countries, it was a bit difficult for me to get more information about Turkmenistan. This country is still quite closed and isolated in communication. But in general, we can say that in 4 countries we have these national committees, and the intensivity of their work is also quite different. It depends on the way how they are funded and the regularity of their meetings and the agenda which they have. Most of them consist of researchers, heads of national libraries, archives, and all those who are interested or have expertise in the field of historical research. And then, of course, there are quite a lot of research projects which are oriented to understanding some historical documents, or at least restoring or renovating them. For example, one of the huge projects related to documentary heritage was conducted just a few years ago between Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan, where the documentary heritage related to the rebellion of 1916 were very thoroughly revealed, and the map of that rebellion was fully, let's say, restored. And now we have the chronology of that rebellion literally day by day. And this is a huge work which was done by scholars from 4 countries. So there are a lot of such small and big scale research projects which also contribute to the developing of documentary heritage. Plus, we can say that countries are trying to build and reconsider their national list of documentary heritage, and in some cases it can lead the members of committee to debates of which documents should be included, which shouldn't be included, and so on and so forth. So there are quite a lot of, let's say, discussions which on a regular basis, yeah, we can say. And of course, all those institutions who are in different intensivity engaged into documentary work, they do quite a lot of public events in order to familiarize broad publicity with the documentary heritage and understanding some historical processes or events or some facts which might be debated or sometimes contested, because documentary heritage in many senses related to historical, social, and cultural memory. And in this sense, it is very often considered as a contested memory. And that's why there are such public events like open days for national libraries or national archives, and then exhibitions dedicated to different events from the past, also help the public to better understand, yeah, let's say, the history which um, they have in general, and at the same time in details related to some certain specific element of history which is taken in the focus of these exhibitions. Apart of that, all these research institutions, they are again in different scale engaged into document restoration, preservation, digitalization, and cataloging of documents. And of course, this part, which is in some sense related to academic research, on another hand, it is related to some technical aspects, also requires quite a lot of resources and expertise in order to make this process more effective and efficient. Next slide, please. Considering the challenges which Central Asian countries have, I would like to underline some, let's say, broad contextual challenges which all these countries have to face. And first of all, this is a post-Soviet legacy which relates to lack of open access to some documents. In the aftermath of the dissolution of the Soviet Union, one significant challenge arises from the legacy of secrecy and restricted access to historical documents. Some documents continue to be classified or simply not readily available to researchers and the public, hindering the comprehensive understanding of the region's history. And another challenge which is interconnected to the previous one is the confidentiality of documents. And we still have some documents which are believed to be too sensitive and still are not open not only to the broad public but even for the researchers. For example, we can speak here about archives of the Committee for State Security of the Soviet Union, especially the period of Stalinism, for example, and they all remain highly confidential. And these archives hold, as it is believed to be, sensitive information, and their restricted access raises challenges for researchers, for archivists, and for all those who are trying to explore the historical records in a full way. And this actually creates a lot of debates on different platforms, academic platforms, how long, for example, these documents are going to be confidential, and what are exactly the reasons to keep them confidential, considering that we've been living after the dissolution of the Soviet Union for more than 30 years already. Yeah? So it's also quite interesting question, but we still have it. Another contextual challenge is a cross-border conflicts, which actually affect the communication between Central Asian countries. And in many cases, the research in the field of documentary heritage has to be somehow correlated with the political climate in the region. And it's very much important to understand what exactly tendencies in politics we have at the moment. And this also affects the way not the way, but at least the topics which are taken in order to be considered. And of course, some documents might also be believed to be too sensitive to open. For example, historical maps which can identify the borders of the states at different years of history. And then another point, Russian-Ukrainian war, somebody might be surprised thinking how it can relate to Central Asia. But since we've been we used to be a part of the Soviet Union, and there are quite a lot in common, including the settlement, for example, of Ukrainian people in Central Asian countries, then a huge famine in the Ukraine, and so on and so forth. There are quite a lot of documents which are now can be interpreted in different ways and create a lot of, let's say, potential conflicts between countries. And in this sense, it makes difficult for historians to predict, let's say, some potential negative perception or to be claimed as proponents or opponents of a certain position. So this geopolitical context also affects the situation in our countries. Another thing which can be considered on the one hand as a challenge for the region, on the other hand, it's an opportunity for the region. This is what I mentioned before, the decolonization process, because on the one hand, of course, it's a huge opportunity to re-evaluate and redefine historical narratives and to bring to the light a lot of documents which used to be confidential. But at the same time, it's also this process of reconsidering and rethinking the past means sometimes confronting difficult aspects of this so-called colonial history, because in Central Asian regions there is still no agreement regarding the Soviet legacy, and should be the Soviet Union considered as a colonial state or it shouldn't be considered as a colonial state, and what type of colonialism we had in the past, and so on. So all these things might create sometimes quite uncomfortable or controversial discussions, and of course, it makes a lot of researchers be much more careful in dealing with the documents related to decolonization. Next slide, please. And about some very technical, let's say, challenges for the program and its implementation in Central Asian countries, or the way how it is developed there, is one of the issues is what was mentioned by UNESCO staff and national commissions from Central Asian countries, that since Memory of the World program is not based on a certain convention of UNESCO, yeah, and it means that there is no specific funding which is given to implement the program. It also affects. It has quite a lot of effects because there is no specific agenda, for example, to monitor this program or to make it more smoothly implementing. And another thing which relates to capacity of the experts, first of all, it's a lack of experts in many technical aspects, like restoration of documents or, for example, preservations of documents. And in this sense, of course, this such adequate expertise in this field is very much critical for the successful execution of the program, because otherwise we understand that quite a lot of documents might be just damaged because of lack of this expertise, how exactly to restore them. And then, of course, some technical things which relate to equipment for digitalization. It's also, for example, in some countries of Central Asia, the situation is better. In some countries, it's worse. So we have to consider the different level of this technical provision for digitalization process. And of course, another thing which also quite probably not that specific, but anyway takes place. This is a lack of communication between institutions who are dedicated to research this documentary heritage. And sometimes this lack of communication comes to competition between institutions for the documents and the storage, which of them is much richer, which of them is not that one. So it also creates quite a lot of, let's say, daily troubles in communication. But in general, it affects the whole approach, yeah, to the past and to history. And another thing which is also quite critical here is awareness raising issues, since public awareness and public engagement are essential for the preservation and appreciation of the documentary heritage. It's very important to have this a kind of support from the public as well. And since the broad population is not very much familiar with the program, and sometimes the understanding of documentary heritage is in a very low level, it also affects the way how the governments, for example, pay or not to pay enough attention to the program. Next slide, please. At the same time, there are some positive moments or some opportunities for the program. And the first is this shared historical heritage. We can say that all the Central Asian countries, they have rich and shared historical heritage, and this is a significant, we can say, asset to the program, because this common history includes cultural diversity and a strong basis for their cooperation and preservation some documents, which of course transcends these national borders. Another thing is understanding of the regional context, which is very much important for all the countries of Central Asia, since we are a part of the same region with the same post-Soviet or Soviet legacy. We can say that it's quite easy for countries to communicate in terms of some nuances regarding document selection, their preservation, their presentation in different contexts, historical, cultural, or social dynamics, and plus considering all this changing geopolitical and political situation as well. Plus, networking of experts, it's also one of the positive and very promising elements, speaking about opportunities, because a lot of experts from different social fields, including history, they are actually engaged in many regional projects, and at the same time they have a quite good, let's say, personal connections, which also helps them to work mutually on different initiatives within national libraries or national archives and get access to some documents. And in this sense, of course, it also helps to understand the tendencies and at the same time to be able to bring to attention some documents which, for example, in former times were not paid enough attention to. And of course, it also speaks about willingness to collaborate. Despite the fact that there are quite a lot of tensions on the political level, at the same time, at the level of academic research, the experts and researchers are very closely working on different topics. And in this sense, their willingness to collaborate make quite easy as a process of communication. Sometimes, of course, research requires to be provided with a special official permission from the state bodies. For example, in Tajikistan, if you would like to do any type of research, you need to ask for official permission from the responsible state agencies. In Uzbekistan, you have to inform, for example, state agencies regarding some research. But anyway, the researchers and academics are trying to find the ways how exactly to make this possible. And then it's a huge development or movement of oral history in Central Asia also helps actually to open a lot of documents which are now in hands of different families in different locations, very dispersed throughout the country and throughout the region. And this oral history movement actually helps a lot of people to understand that those family memories which they have and which is embodied in books, diaries, photographs, pictures, letters, and so on and so forth, is also a part of documentary heritage. And this actually helps to raise awareness of the broader population regarding the significance of the documents in order to understand the past and at the same time to understand the present. And such the development of oral history methodology is very much promising in the region, despite the fact that it also creates some clashes between, let's say, classical historians who believe that only those sources which are fixed as historical ones should be relevant or can be relevant. But at the same time, all these collections which are now is the focus of attention of different researchers and research centers are very much, I would say it's one of the plausible tendencies in the region. And as I mentioned before, this decolonization movement, it's first of all about opportunity to make history more inclusive and at the same time to consider it from different levels. It's not only the level of, let's say, ideological discourse of the states, which usually accompanies a lot of documents, but it's more about bringing to the dialogue different communities, different actors, and different institutions who might have different perspectives on how to consider different variety of history. Next slide, please. So based on all these challenges and opportunities, I would like to give just a few recommendations which might help Central Asian countries to be more successful in implementation of the MO program. First of all is financial support to probably UNESCO offices, field offices, which might be more effective if they have some funding for specifically given to this program. Another thing is awareness raising workshop. Despite some workshops which have been already conducted in the region, it's very important to have workshops which would be dedicated specifically to awareness raising purposes. So to give a better understanding what this Memory of the World program about and why it is significant. It might sound very naive or maybe very banal, but at the same time, for a lot of people, it's very important to understand this program and its specificity from the first hands, let's say, yeah. So we can, of course, send the interested parties to the UNESCO website, to the MO website, but probably it would not have that effect which it might have. And capacity building training, what's also very important here to hold this training in national languages, or at least in Russian language. Because in some, for example, regions of Central Asia, within certain countries, you can go to some remote areas and identify that people don't speak Russian, for example, but they do speak only their national languages. Yeah. So in this sense, Russian is still the language of the common communication, but at the same time, there is a huge need to probably translate all these materials into local languages. But at the same time, what is very important here is to speak about capacity building training in terms of new methodologies, new instruments, for example, some new methodologies of restoration, maybe, or new methods of preserving materials, so maybe cataloging them and so on and so forth. So it's more about the broadening, let's say, the views of experts who are working in the field and working within their specific methodologies which they have been trained in former times. And another thing is which might be very useful for the region, is to establish the Central Asian Regional Committee as a common platform where these members might discuss their joint nominations or their common documentary heritage. Because in many cases, we come up with a situation that there are a lot of documents which are dispersed throughout the region. And so it means that sometimes it maybe in this sense it would be much easier to communicate through this common regional platform rather than to communicate with different separate institutions in order to get the agreement. And in this sense, probably such a committee would be a good solution. That's it. Next slide, please. Thank you.
네, 감사합니다. 오늘 굉장히 귀중한 발표 다시 한 번 박수 부탁드리겠습니다. 네, 비교적 시간 관리가 잘 되었습니다. 한 5분 정도 저희들이 지체가 되었는데요. 지금 커피 브레이크를 좀 4시 5분까지 갖도록 하겠습니다. 4시 5분까지 갖고 4시 5분부터 6시까지 그 아까 발표하셨던 그 유네스코 세계문화유산 한국위원회 서경희 교수님의 그 진행으로 전체 토론을 한 2시간 정도 이렇게 진행을 해보겠습니다. 오늘 굉장히 많은 문제가 좀 논의가 됐고요. 그리고